I used to think that drinking all night and turning my house into a blue light disco was a perfectly fine thing to do, and that it wasn't damaging to my mental health at all, but it was. So now I'm sober and I feel much happier than ever before, and it's not actually boring. So let's talk about sobriety. This is a story about how I woke up one day and realized my life was an absolute mess, and how that led me to finally sort out my mental health once and for all, and what you can learn from it. Hi, I'm Jeremy Godwin, and I talk about better mental health. So, time for some honesty. There are far too many photos out there of me drunk and making an idiot of myself. These are just some of the tamer ones, and I'm fairly certain that there are some people from my past who have probably never even met me when I wasn't drunk. While I'm not going to sit here and beat myself up for having fun when I was younger, what I will say is that I know all too well that those things were not great. First of all, the guy in those photos was not happy, and he was using alcohol all the time or regularly as a way to cope with negative feelings. And secondly, I distinctly remember far too many mornings after the night before, or afternoons after the night before, where I'd wake up and A, feel like I was going to throw up, and B, begin to remember all of the stupid things that I had said and done while I was drunk, and then I'd spend the next few days feeling really embarrassed and mortified. So if I had $1 for every apology that I've ever had to give someone because I said something or did something stupid for being, inconsiderate or whatever, then I would be a multimillionaire by now. But putting aside the constant self-humiliation, what was worse than all of that is the effect that my drinking was having on my mental health. Alcohol is a depressant, and so even though you might think that you feel great and powerful when you're drunk, the morning after the night before is usually a very different story. And when I hit my 30s, not only did I find that it took more and more to get me drunk, I also discovered that hangovers began to last for longer, 2 days or even 3 days sometimes. Frankly, I was a hot mess, and it's really hard to get your life together in your mental health when you're a barely functioning shell of a human being. So on July 6, 2018, I quit. Cold turkey. I know the date because it was my birthday. I had spent the night before getting absolutely hammered, oversharing to friends on social media. It was winter here, and I was drinking every last bit of alcohol in the house, even some weird tasting liqueur stuff from IKEA that tasted like pine needles because I'd run out of Prosecco, red wine, and vodka, and then I moved on to that stuff. And so the following day was my 42nd birthday, and I spent it in bed, in tears, and feeling like I had hit rock bottom. And I swore to myself that I was never going to drink again, and now I'm 4 years sober. It hasn't been easy, and we all have our own relationship with alcohol or other substances, so I know that my story won't necessarily apply to everyone, but let me say this. If you feel like you have a problem, then maybe you do, and that's okay. You will be okay. Because admitting it to yourself that you do have a problem is the first step. And I think that takes an enormous amount of courage. So I'd like to share 5 tips that have helped me and things I've learned along the way, and that hopefully will be helpful to you if you are struggling with your alcohol or substance use. The first is identify why you want to get sober. There are lots of different places that you can start. However, I talk a lot in my podcast and these videos about the value of self-awareness and how knowing yourself and being truthful with yourself can make an enormous difference in terms of being able to then deal with your challenges. So if you're thinking about changing your relationship with alcohol or other substances, ask yourself why and make a list of all of the reasons. For me, I was sick of waking up the next day and feeling ill, while also being mortified when I started remembering all of the stupid things that I had said and done. Know what your why is and remind yourself of it daily, because that can really help you to stay motivated as you take small steps forward. Okay, next, identify why you used substances. And this is about understanding what your triggers are, which I talked about in episode 91 of my podcast, and you'll find that linked in the description below. This is the type of thing that you'll really find much easier to do if you get support from a professional, like a counselor, because it does require you to dig deep and to have some very honest conversations with yourself. But however you choose to deal with it, understanding why you use or even rely on substances will help you to better understand yourself. And it's essential for my next tip, which is address the causes or triggers. Because until you deal with the stuff that brings you to that headspace of wanting to get drunk or whatever, you may find yourself repeating the same patterns over and over again. This is also something that I think most people would, again, benefit from professional help with, because it takes time, effort, and perseverance. But when you address the root cause, you're better able to manage it in the long term, instead of just repeatedly trying to put band-aids over the issues. Okay, next, take things one day at a time, because healing is a journey, not a destination, and it really does take a lot of work and a lot of time. So instead of worrying about tomorrow or next year or the year after that, just focus on today and take things one day at a time, one step at a time. Okay, next, get support. Look, there are lots of support programs out there, and I think that they do a great job, but for me personally, I don't align with some of the beliefs behind programs like AA, because it doesn't fit for me personally, so I chose not to pursue that. But if it does fit for you and it aligns with your life philosophy, then go for it. But there are also lots of community-based support groups, and as I said before, it's going to be really helpful to work one-on-one with a professional, like a counselor or therapist, in order to work through the underlying issues that led you to use and abuse substances like alcohol in the first place. The entire point here is that although you're the one that's going to be doing the bulk of the work, and again, that will take time, effort, and perseverance, you don't have to go through these things on your own, and nor should you. And finally, if you think that you might have a problem or your substance use is making you feel bad about yourself, I'm here to tell you that change is possible. 4 years later, for me, quitting drinking was the best thing I have ever done, and now my mental health is in a much better place and much more stable than it's been for decades. And at least now, when I make a fool of myself, I'm in full control when I do it. Whatever you choose to do, the choice is yours, as it is with all things related to your well-being. So, what choice will you make today? Let me know in the comments below. And watch this video next about self-worth for more tips that can help you, because the way you feel about yourself has an enormous impact on the choices that you make. Thank you so much for joining me today. Take care and talk to you next time.